life in that kind of environment, you get it. And some people have genetics. Maybe. Hey, folks, it is February the 3rd, and today we're going over chapters 118 and 119. It has to do with the Spanish conquest of Latin America. And so the terms we have on the board are the Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, Ponce de Leon, Hernando Cortez, and Pizarro. So just a second, and we will get that down. All right, kids. So like we mentioned, hey guys and gals, need your attention for just a couple minutes. All right, so like we mentioned, though we use the term like discovery of the Americas, there were obviously civilizations and people who lived in the Americas, right? And so like here's an example here. This is an Inca village, I think Cusco, their capital. And the Incas had a very well-structured society. They did terrace farming, which is what a farming method where you can make flat step-like surfaces to plant your crops on. You often find this in Asian countries as well for like land conservation. So, sometimes they had to bring in topsoil onto these terraces and put it down. They were good at irrigation through like either aqueducts from mountain springs and sources like that. They had forms of metalworking. They're the only Native Americans that had working animals that could help them out, llamas. All other Native Americans, the biggest animals they had to help them out was dogs. And so they didn't have like cows and horses. And nobody tried to make domesticated bison. So that's what they had. Of course, the Mayans were kind of like the golden age of American civilizations. They're very well known for their pyramids, for very complex religion and writing style. Their mathematics was very exact, and they already came up with advanced mathematics, the concept of zero. They could count to the millions. They were also good astronomers and were able to make very exact calendars as well. Their civilization, we're not quite sure why it declined, but I mean, the Mayan people are still around. In fact, there's still people who can speak Mayan today. But the thing is that we're not sure why. Some of the reasons might have to do with deforestation, and then they overfarmed. And when they overfarmed, they eventually depleted the nutrition in the soil, so crops weren't coming up, and so eventually you get famine and stuff like that. That's a problem sometimes. I'm not really sure. Like I said, a lot of their written language, the hieroglyphs, still haven't been translated. So, like, if you're like interested in like anthropology, archaeology, or certain forms of history, that's like a big field where there's still a lot to be discovered. So this is a calendar, a Mayan calendar. So as you can see, it looks a little different from our concept of a calendar.
Just a tad.
They had they were of course polytheist. They had a very complex religion with their own creation myths. Of course, myths also with like not just like the end of the world, but kind of like what you might call a rebirth of the world. So something kind of like you could like compare, I guess, to like Norse culture, I guess, in a way. And the Aztecs are going to adopt and modify a lot of their religion and their cultural beliefs, kind of like how the Romans did with the Greeks in many ways. This is an Inca ceremonial gold mask. So a lot of the metalworking. The thing is about Native Americans, there were no Native Americans who were actually capable of smelting iron. They hadn't quite figured out how to get a furnace hot enough in order to melt it, remove impurities, and to reshape it. But there were some who were able to put tin and copper together, kind of like the ancient Greeks. But some of them were reaching the Bronze Age in many ways. However, most metalwork was very simple, decorational, like the biggest, baddest military of the time, the Aztecs. A lot of their weapons were made of sharpened onyx, which is basically gets sharp like glass and razor blades. Clubs, arrows, things like that, weapons tipped with shells. And so the Aztecs were known for being a very they're known for being very cruel in the ritualistic means. They had a priesthood, and the priesthood's whole point was essentially to offer up hearts and blood up to the sun to keep the sun alive. And they did so through ritualistic splitting open people's chests and pulling their hearts out, trying to do so and keep them alive while doing it. Ritualistic cannibalism. They also kept sores on their bodies that they constantly kept bleeding. So whenever Spanish explorers first came in contact with them, they actually made comparisons to what they're doing with essentially the Christian practice of the Eucharist. They saw it as like the complete other or the opposite. And what I mean by that is in Orthodox and Catholic church services, they'll have like an altar, and the priest will bless like the bread and the wine and stuff like that. And so these Catholic Spaniards, when they saw this, they saw something that looked like an abomination version of it. They saw an altar, but instead of bread, they saw people taking a bite out of a heart. And instead of wine, they saw like blood all over the place. So they thought this was exactly like they thought that they actually found like a tribe of demonic people, like real devil worshippers. So this really freaked out the Spanish when they saw all this. And of course, if I saw people cutting other people's hearts out, I'd freak out too. All right. Ponce de Leon, so your book mentioned him. He's credited with discovering Florida. So he's going to give credit to Spain's claim in North America, which is going to be a big thorn in the side to the British as they start establishing their 13 colonies. And so the British are going to be very anxious about this holding, because as we're going to find later on, England is going to, of course, settle, parts of North America, as you know. And in fact, the Spanish are going to be there all the way until a guy called Andrew Jackson kind of goes in there illegally and kicks them out. We'll talk about that in American history. All right, so here's his route. He goes from Spanish Puerto Rico, sails on over. He's going to discover Florida. However, he's not going to send explorers onto land. That's going to come later. And you see, they're going to swing on back to Cuba. All right, here we have Hernando Cortez. He's the guy who's a conquistador. Remember, those are guys who are Spanish soldiers for hire, often nobles, who have learned a lot from fighting the Moors in the Reconquista. And so they have this very militant mentality. And he is going to make contact with the Aztecs. He's going to he's going to befriend some of the Mayans who live in the Aztec Empire. And the Aztecs were known as being very cruel to the Mayan people around them. They would have ritualistic wars to where they would meet the Mayans on the battlefield, and essentially the weapons they would use were clubs made to knock the Mayans out, and so that they could enslave them or bring them back to their capital to cut their hearts out. So the Mayans weren't too happy about that. Cortez is going to make contact with the Aztecs, who at first are going to think that he's actually a god, because he's wearing this metallic shiny armor. They come off these magnificent boats out of the ocean. They had giant dogs that they called horses. They had guns that could do they were just like magical to them. Eventually, they caught on that they were humans and that they were probably bent on conquering them. And so when the game was up, Cortez is going to take Montezuma, the emperor of the Aztecs, as hostage. He's going to flee the city and come back with troops later on. And through a siege, he's going to take over the capital of the Aztec Empire. Lucky for him, when he gets there, he's going to find that a little disease that's extremely contagious, but also very deadly to Native Americans, called smallpox, had already gone through the city and weakened almost every fighting age person in that city. And so it only took like a couple of days, and the greatest empire in all of the Americas fell due to illness, iron, and guns. So.
That's a big oof.
Yeah, well, it was germ warfare. It's a technological advantage. Cortez, his troops only numbered in the dozens, but they did have help, of course, from their Indian allies. One of his lieutenants, this guy here, Pizarro, he's going to hear stories that there's people south of the Aztec Empire that have magnificent amounts of silver and gold, because the Aztecs had so much gold that the Spanish would actually try to load up their ships on it. Sometimes their ships sank from all the gold they put on it. It was just boat after boat after boat full of Aztec gold. The Spanish are going to get so much gold from the Aztec empires, it's going to ruin their economy. It's going to put so much gold and silver into circulation that it drives the prices of everything up. There's so much money that everything now costs more. However, the poor peasants of Spain didn't get their hands on the silver. So they eventually got super, super poor, and the rich got super, super rich. But it also hurt Spain too, because they had so much money, less people wanted to get into things like manufacturing. So they wound up using that money to buy stuff made in England. And so England got the best of both worlds. They built up industries that made up the best industries to sell stuff, and they sold it to Spain. And they also got the Spanish gold because Spain would pay them for it. So they had a complete. It's one of the reasons why, especially like during the age of the American Revolution, England is going to be the world superpower because they have the best industries, and now they got all that Spanish gold. And so it's going to really work out for them. So Pizarro is going to go down, and he's going to do the same thing essentially that Cortez did. He's going to go down into the Andes Mountains, and he's going to conquer the Inca. And so he's going to make it all the way down to Cusco. And in less than 20 years from the fall of the Aztecs, he's going to take down the Inca Empire, the biggest, most powerful empire in all of South America. And so the Spaniards would then colonize these places. They would, as we're going to find later, and they're going to try really hard to make the Native Americans within Meso, which is Middle America, and South America, into Spanish subjects. They're going to try to teach them the Spanish language, Spanish farming customs, family structures, manners of dress, and of course Catholicism. And it's going to have varying effects and things like that. However, one good thing about the Spanish is that they're going to have very strict laws eventually against slavery and against like torture and stuff like that. So that they are going to have that going for them. But, all right, kids, let's go ahead. Let's get our notes for the day. So that was brief. For most of you, I know that's like a review. So the Mayans, what can y'all tell me about the Mayans? Okay.
They died. Civilization.
There's no Mayans around.
Most of them civilization.
I'm on the right page.
Well, okay, that's the Incas, yeah. So civilization.
They were making those eyes in Mexico.
You're Indians who live in Andes Mountains, South America. All right, so that's them. But what about the Mayans? What can y'all tell me about the Mayans?
They resided in Mexico.
Yes.
They knew enough to make a solar calendar for a whole year.
Yes. They were in Mexico. Solar calendar, very accurate.
They can count to 1 million.
Yes. Great math.
And,
Bless you.
Thank you.
Did they build anything?
Temple.
oh yeah, temples.
Yeah, pyramids. So they built pyramids that look oddly a lot like pyramids found in ancient Babylon. Yeah, the step-style pyramid that they would build is something that's going to be common throughout a lot of societies throughout time. And so, yeah, that's pretty brief, but yeah, they're a pretty advanced society. They had like social structures like nobility and peasantry, just like in Europe. Complex religion, societal rules and laws, farming methods of rotating crops. Their diet was known to be a lot healthier than like what Europeans had, like even at that time. So yeah, in some ways, technologically, they were very behind Europeans, but in other ways, they were more advanced. So it's kind of funny how people work things out whenever they're isolated. They can work out problems in their own particular way. Aztecs, what about those guys? Yeah, migrated into Mexico. And so this is a very normal thing for all human societies, especially including Native Americans. Humans migrate always. Native Americans migrated all the time. By the time the Spanish make it to Texas, there had already been migrations of one group of people to another area. So everybody is a new kid on the block to wherever they go. Nobody stays for like millennia in the same spot. Very rarely does that happen.
They had a lot of gold.
Yeah, lots of gold.
They're really good at architecture.
Yeah.
They worship a lot.
I just felt that so bad. Okay. So yeah, those are some pretty brief things on them, right? But don't worry. The thing is, I don't know, it's like, I always feel like I don't do enough on Native Americans. All right, Ponce de Leon. So what did he discover?
He traveled with Columbus and discovered Florida.
Yeah.
They discovered Florida. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. And he also claimed it. He said, I claim this in the name of the king. But the thing is, the Spanish are never going to do anything with Florida. They're not really going to be interested. A lot of what they see of Florida is just swamp and not too safe. And so they're going to build like a couple of forts there. And that's about it. They're like, here, put some soldiers there. Leave them alone. All right. So. Yeah, we don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. No. And yeah, I mean, a lot of Florida is kind of like, like not livable. But the nice parts are nice. All right.
Well, I mean, you gotta worry about the common Florida man.
The what?
The
Florida man? Yeah, there was no Florida man. I mean, you had like, what's the name of those Indians over there? Huh?
Gators.
No. Like Native American tribe that's there. Like the American army could not kick them out, and they wound up staying. I don't remember. Got like a college football team named after him. All right, Hernando Cortez. So what did he do? Yeah, conquered the Aztec Empire and claimed Mexico for Spain.
There was the Cherokee, Seminole,
Seminoles, that's who. I'm thinking of the Seminoles. Yeah, the Seminoles were the one people that they could never kick out. Yeah, and they were good at hiding in those swamps I was talking about. So conquered the Aztecs and claimed Mexico for Spain. And so, That's where we're going to see a lot of changes going on there. Away from, now, I mean, a lot of like native ways throughout a lot of these places are going to stick around, but definitely Spanish culture is going to be injected. All right, last one, Pizarro.
F O P. Like you said,
Oh, yeah. So Pizarro, not Pizza Man, Pizarro. Pizarro. Nah. All right, I'm just gonna tell you. So, okay, so goes to South America.
Conquer Inca.
It's in like northwest
Oh.
South America. Goes to South America and conquers the Inca.
Not the Peru city of.
Let's go.
Under the name.
And there you have it, kids. And so we're going to come back tomorrow and talk more about Spain and the New World. And then we're going to talk about how some of the Dutch and the English start coming into other parts of the New World, because they're going to hear all these stories about, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I need gold. And they're going to come on looking for some gold.
So they ran out of gold.
Well,
Like, I need oil.
all right, folks, that's going to end it for today. Talk to you tomorrow.